I got a bunch of emails and tweets about this, so we'll just kind of open with this. It wasn't just any one person who emailed me. But last week, Bret Hart gave an interview to the YouTube channel HN Live to promote the Dungeon Wrestling pay-per-view that took place this past Friday in Calgary. Bret's sons, for those who don't know, they run the promotion. It's like a new age version of Stampede Wrestling, but I guess they can't call it that. So he did an interview that got a lot of attention for comments that he made about modern wrestling. And I didn't have a chance to talk about this last week, but I got a lot of questions about it. Everybody knows I'm a big Bret Hart fan. They wanted to know what I thought. The video, by the way, has since been taken down. I don't know that the host really intended for there to be this much controversy coming out of it, so he either deleted the video or he put it on private, but it's not there anymore. But this is what Bret said. I went to a show not too long ago in Cardiff, a pay-per-view. It was embarrassing to sit in the front row and watch all the kids in the audience slap their leg as the wrestlers slap their leg in these kick spots where they pretend to kick each other with shin pads and slap sounds over and over. To realize that the crowd is in on it, the entire floor is clapping and slapping their leg, I'm going, we used to try to make it real. What happened? Everybody is in on it. It's a big giant charade. I had a hard time feeling the fan part of me come to life. You know, perhaps if Goldberg had slapped his leg, Bret could have wrestled another 10 years. He said, when I watched Dungeon Wrestling and I'm watching this young girl wrestling, just watching her take someone over in a headlock and having a real headlock on was so much more than anything I saw in Cardiff with the wrestlers over there. It goes back to simple art. Wrestling is an art form. All art is simple. Wrestling is a simple art that is really just storytelling or good versus bad, most of the time anyway, and it's an easy story to tell. Wrestlers have been doing it for decades, and wrestlers from 2005 up don't know anything about telling stories or what headlocks are. And then later in the interview, he said, when I see wrestlers today just slapping and the crowd going woo and everyone keeps slapping one after the other and these guys have welts all over their chest and blisters and their chests hurt that night and they go, geez, I was an idiot tonight and let somebody slap me on the chest as hard as he could 500 times and my chest is killing me. That's what they used to do to the jabronis back in the days. They would chop them, beat them, slap them. I would never let a guy slap me and chop me. Ric Flair is the only guy that ever chopped me. He usually got to me in the end where I would tell you, Rick, you can give me one chop in the match to get it over with. But as far as the match goes, I'm not going to sit there and stick my chest out for some guy to slap me on the chest for an hour. That's not what wrestling is. It's not about hurting yourself. It's not about coming back to the dressing room and feeling everyone knows that it's not real, right? They all know what's going on. So why are you letting someone slap you and chop you and whip you across the chest and hurt you, and you're in pain all night, and you wake up the next day with blisters all over your chest and do it again the next night? It is just stupid. So that got a lot of people talking. A lot of people agreed with Bret. A lot of people did the whole, old man yells at cloud and he's so bitter and this and that. I actually watched the video. I didn't just read the comments. I watched the video before it got taken down. Bret's an old school guy. And the thing about Bret is he gets a lot of praise from me and a lot of people and fans of his work. Why does Bret get a lot of praise? A lot of it has to do with the fact that when you watched a Bret Hart match, because he was not the biggest and the strongest guy, but he was in there, and when he was, it felt real. He did his best when he was taking a beating and he was on the receiving end of a beating to make it feel like, man, this guy really is in distress here. He's getting the hell beaten out of him. And then he would make his comeback and everything. But yeah, Bret never went back to the locker room and had fucking bleeding welts all over his body, like he was in a real fight. The thing about Bret, and I always think of a quote from him, and I don't know where he first said it, but many years ago he said this, that the real art of pro wrestling is making it seem like you are harming your opponent, when in reality you are not harming a single hair on their head. And that is the art of wrestling. If you can convince the viewer that the other person really is being beaten up, and in reality when they go back to the locker room, you haven't put a scratch on them. That's the art of wrestling. And that's an easy point to understand. It makes a lot of sense. Wrestling is not real in the sense that it's not a boxing match. It's not a mixed martial arts contest. You're not going in there and really trying to hurt the other person like you would in a boxing match or in an MMA fight. But I think part of what happens now is guys go out there and, there are some, big tough guys in wrestling, and some of them are former football players. Some of them come from the MMA world. I think a lot of them want to come out of a match and feel like they were in a real fight. I think they get off on it. I think they enjoy it. So they don't mind going out there and taking the chops and taking the kendo sticks to the back. And the first thing they'll do when they go back to the locker room is they'll have somebody take a picture of their back or of their chest, right? That they can post on Twitter and show everybody all the welts and all the battle scars. I think they get off on it. They like being able to go out there and they want to feel like they were in a real fight, even though they're not. And that's something we see a lot of. And it's not a style that bothers me. I mean, look, I can watch a Gunther match any day of the week. The Intercontinental title match at WrestleMania, how many chops were there, right? How many chops and hard blows? And it was the same thing when Sheamus and Drew McIntyre went to the back. I think they tweeted out a photo of them with, welts all over their bodies and shit. But I love that match, right? It's a matter of personal taste, but I understand why Bret would feel that way. Because it goes against the very concept of what professional wrestling is supposed to be, right? It's a performance. It's like theater. And you're not supposed to go out there and hurt the other person, so why then are you putting your chest out and standing there and letting this guy do these things to you, right? It actually makes sense, what he's saying. What I took from this is when he talks about the slapping of the leg and everything, it's not... What really seems to bother him when I hear him make these comments is when he says, I look at the crowd and I see little kids slapping their leg, almost maybe it's out of reflex, when they see the wrestlers giving a super kick. And it really bums him out. His issue sounds more like the audience is in on it now in a way that they never were before. Bret would go to the ring, as a lot of guys did back then, and stomp their feet. All wrestlers do that. When you throw a punch, what do? You stomp on the mat, almost out of reflex, right? Why do you do that? That's stupid. Think about it. When a wrestler gives another wrestler a kick or a punch, why are they stomping on the mat? Because it makes a sound. It sounds better. It sounds more impactful. It's the same reason why guys slap their thigh or slap their leg when they give a super kick or a knee strike. You hear that sound. And if you do it just right, it sounds like a gunshot going off. It just makes it sound better. Deliver a super kick without slapping your thigh where it makes no noise, right? It's not the same. But his issue seems to be that now they don't even take any great effort to kind of mask it. They just do it. They don't care that the fans can see them doing it, and it bothers Bret. And I'll be honest, I can understand that. I can understand him feeling that way. If you're going to do it, at least try to hide it, try to mask it. Malachi Black, I think, does a tremendous job of that. Malachi Black's move is the Black Mass, right, or whatever he calls it now. But in WWE, he called it the Black Mass. It's a spin kick, right? It's like a spinning heel kick. Well, when he does it, he's smacking himself on the thigh, and it makes a great sound when he, kicks the guy in the jaw. But I rarely ever see him actually slapping his thigh. Like, he does it. It's such a quick thing that you don't even notice it. That's the way it should be done. But now everybody is doing super kicks. They do fucking 25 super kicks in a match, and all you see is them slapping their thigh. So I can understand him feeling that way. At least try to do a better job of masking it. He made a comment also in there. This wasn't even the full quote from the video, but he talked in there also about how now you get guys who bunch together outside the ring to catch people when they do dives out of the ring. Well, you've heard me complain about that before. It looks fucking dumb. Everybody has to do dives in every single match. It's just accepted now because everybody does it. Leave the dives to people like Vikingo. There are certain guys that don't need to be diving in matches, but they all get together outside. They stand there, they look up. The guy has to position himself and has to wait and everything. And then they catch him and they all fall down like bowling pins. Bret is not wrong. He's not wrong when he says that. But the slapping of the leg stuff, I think what really seems to bother him is just the fact that everybody's in on it now. And back then, wrestlers, they tried to do a better job of hiding it so people wouldn't see it when they were doing it. And honestly, I can agree with him on that. I don't think he's wrong. But I also enjoy watching the kind of harder style of wrestling that you find in some of these matches. I just think it's, to each their own. Everybody is going to like what they like. But Bret's an old school guy. Bret was always about protecting your opponent and not hurting your opponent because they were on the road so much. If you hurt the other guy, you got to go and work the next night, maybe twice on Sunday. That doesn't do anybody any good if you're hurting other people. He took pride. He said it in his Hall of Fame speech, in his book, and everywhere else. Like, I took great pride in not hurting anybody in my career. So for him to sit there in the front row and see guys beating the shit out of each other, he's got to be sitting there going, man, what has wrestling become? I find myself doing that sometimes. I sit here. As much as I enjoy some of these matches, I do sit here and say the same thing. And I'm not as old as Bret is, but I sit here and go, man, what has wrestling become? It's the style that it is now. Wrestling is not exactly what it used to be. And wrestling shouldn't be exactly what it used to be 30 or 40 years ago. Wrestling changes, it evolves. You hope it gets better. In some ways, it's gotten worse. But, I can completely understand Bret's point when he's saying these things. And people are going to say, oh, he's just being bitter. That's not how I take it. I don't take it as him being bitter. I think he's genuinely sad. That wrestling used to be a certain way, and it's kind of gotten away from that. And everybody is sort of part of the act now, and that's not how it was back then. You were able to hide it from people and not let them in on every little thing, and it's just not that way anymore.